Picture this moment clearly. The furnace in the basement goes quiet. The thermostat on the wall turns blank. Outside, wind slams snow against the glass as the temperature drops. 10 degrees, 20, sinking fast below freezing. In the modern world, this moment is terrifying because we live inside a climate-controlled illusion. We press a button and expect warmth. We turn a dial and winter obeys. We no longer see heat as something we create, only something that arrives on demand. And the moment the grid fails, that illusion collapses. Pipes freeze, homes become iceboxes. Families huddle in emergency shelters, waiting for systems they do not control to come back online. Modern heating, efficient on paper, reveals its true weakness. It only works when everything else works perfectly. But living quietly among us is a community that does not panic when the lights go out. They do not fear the dark. They do not fear the cold. While the rest of the world scrambles for generators and blankets, their homes remain steady and warm. Not because they are tougher, but because they never surrendered control of heat in the first place. I'm talking about the Amish. Their secret isn't grit or extra layers of wool. It is a forgotten engineering system, one that traces back to Roman builders, Russian winter survivors, and Nordic stone craftsmen. A system that turns solid masonry into a thermal battery, capable of holding warmth long after the fire has died. This is not nostalgia, it is physics. Welcome back to Historia Prime. Today, we're uncovering the ancient Amish winter heating system that quietly out-survived modern technology. And by the end of this video, you may look at your modern furnace and wonder, when it comes to surviving winter, did progress actually move us forward or backward? Part 1. The fragility of modern comfort. To understand why ancient heating systems still matter, we first have to confront an uncomfortable truth about the present. We don't need to travel back to the Stone Age to see failure. We only need to rewind a few decades, back to January of 1998. The Great Ice Storm of '98. Freezing rain fell for days across eastern Canada and the northeastern United States, coating everything in thick, crushing layers of ice. Power lines sagged, then snapped. Transmission towers folded in on themselves like aluminium wire. Entire regions went dark, not for hours, but for days, and in many places for weeks. And that is when the illusion of modern comfort shattered. Homes built as airtight machines, dependent on electric blowers, gas igniters, and uninterrupted supply chains, became traps. Without power, furnaces died instantly. Indoor temperatures dropped to near outdoor levels. Pipes froze solid. Doors sealed shut under layers of ice so thick that people had to be cut out of their own homes. Desperation followed quickly. Families dragged propane grills inside, gambling with carbon monoxide poisoning just to feel heat on their hands. Emergency shelters overflowed. What had once been marketed as highly efficient heating revealed its hidden flaw. It had no memory. The moment fuel or electricity stopped flowing, warmth vanished completely. Modern heating, it turned out, was not resilient. It was conditional. It worked beautifully, only as long as every other system worked perfectly. But scattered across that frozen landscape were quiet exceptions. In Amish communities and in a handful of homes that had preserved older methods, life did not collapse into chaos. There was no frantic search for generators, no mass evacuations, no frozen interiors. Inside those homes, fires burned briefly and warmth lingered. Steady, radiant, calm. Meals were cooked, families gathered, sleep came easily. The difference was not toughness. It was not luck. It was a fundamentally different philosophy of heat. Because the Amish approach begins with an assumption modern society abandoned long ago, that energy must be stored, not summoned, that warmth should remain even after the fire goes out, that heat is not a monthly service delivered through pipes and wires, but a responsibility cultivated through design, habit, and understanding. In an Amish home, heat is something you build, something you hold, something you manage. It is embedded into the walls, the hearth, and the daily rhythm of life. And when the grid fails, that difference becomes everything. What the ice storm of '98 revealed was not just a weather disaster, it was a stress test, and modern comfort failed it spectacularly. The old systems, quietly ignored and dismissed as outdated, passed without panic. And that brings us to the question we can no longer afford to ignore. If modern heating collapses the moment the system goes silent, what exactly did we gain by abandoning the old ways? In the next section, we uncover the ancient technology at the center of this quiet resilience, the stone-built heating system that turns fire into stored warmth and houses into thermal batteries capable of surviving winter on their own terms. Part 2. The stone that remembers heat. So what, exactly, is this forgotten technology? Most people picture a familiar object, a black cast-iron wood stove glowing in the corner of a room. And yes, many Amish families do use those, but that is not the system that defines their true independence from the grid. The real heavyweight of winter survival is something far older, far heavier, and far more intelligent. It is the Masonry heater. Across Europe and the northern world, it goes by different names. In Germany, it is the Kachelofen. In Russia, the Pek. In Finland, the Taka. Different cultures, different languages, but the same idea, refined over centuries of brutal winters. And that idea could not be more different from how we heat homes today. A modern metal wood stove is a sprinter. You feed it wood, it flares to life, throws off intense heat, and then, almost immediately, begins to cool. It heats by convection, warming the air itself. But air is a terrible place to store energy. It rises to the ceiling, leaves your feet cold, and slips away through every crack, seam, and window frame. The moment the fire slows, the room grows cold again. The Masonry heater plays a completely different game. It is a marathon runner. Built from stone, brick, or refractory concrete, a Masonry heater can weigh anywhere from 1.5 to 4 tons. And that weight is not a flaw, it is the secret. Because this is not a heater in the modern sense, it is a thermal battery. Here is where ancient engineering reveals its quiet brilliance. Instead of allowing heat and smoke to rush straight up the chimney, wasting nearly 80% of the fire's energy, as open fireplaces do, the Masonry heater forces that heat to take the long way out. Inside the stone body is a carefully designed maze of channels known as a contraflow system. Hot exhaust gases are driven upward, then pulled downward, then guided sideways, winding slowly through the dense masonry before they are finally allowed to escape. Every inch of that journey strips heat from the smoke and transfers it into the stone itself. By the time anything reaches the chimney, most of the usable energy is already gone, not lost, but stored. You build one fast, hot fire. 2, maybe 3 hours. The flames roar, the internal temperatures soar, and then the fire is allowed to die completely. You close the damper. The room grows quiet, and that is when the heater truly begins to work. For the next 12 to 24 hours, the stone mass releases its stored energy slowly, evenly, and silently. No fans, no electricity, no moving parts, just radiant heat, gentle, deep warmth that feels less like hot air and more like standing in sunlight on a cold winter morning. This is heat with memory. It does not vanish when the flames disappear. It lingers. It stabilizes. It turns a house into something modern heating systems can never be. A place that holds warmth instead of constantly chasing it. And once you understand that principle, something unsettling becomes clear. Our ancestors didn't lack technology. They understood physics at a level we quietly abandoned. Because when your home becomes a thermal battery, Winter stops being an emergency. The grid becomes optional, and heat, real heat, returns to where it always belonged, into the walls, into the stone, into the very structure of the home itself. Part 3. The Russian Soul and the Stone that Stores Fire. To truly understand this system, we have to go deeper into history, because this was never just technology. It was culture shaped by survival. In 15th century Russia, winter was not a season, it was a siege. For months at a time, the land froze solid, and survival depended on one object at the center of every home: the Russian stove, known as the pek. This was not a simple heater, it was a massive masonry engine built into the heart of the izba, the log house. It cooked food, baked bread, dried clothing, heated water, and in many homes, it did something that sounds almost unbelievable today. You slept on top of it. Families spent the night above their heat source, absorbing warmth through stone while blizzards raged outside. Some of these stoves were even large enough to bathe in. The firebox itself could become a steam chamber. Heat was not isolated to a single function, it was integrated into life. The Amish carried this same philosophy across the Atlantic. Rooted in German and Swiss traditions, they understood a principle modern building forgot. Stone and brick don't just create heat, they hold it. This is thermal mass, but not all stone behaves the same, and that leads us to a material that feels almost magical: soapstone. Geologists call it steatite. Master stove builders call it the ultimate thermal sponge. Formed deep within the earth under immense pressure, soapstone is dense, non-porous, and remarkably stable under direct flame. It doesn't crack, it doesn't warp, and most importantly, it stores extraordinary amounts of heat, nearly twice as much as steel, and releases it far more slowly. Touch a metal stove during a fire and you burn yourself instantly. That heat is harsh, aggressive, and fleeting. Touch a soapstone heater and it feels like a rock warmed by the sun, deep, calm, and steady. This is radiant heat, infrared warmth that travels directly into your body instead of overheating the air. It warms people, walls, and objects, not just empty space. And once you feel that kind of heat, something becomes very clear. Our ancestors didn't fight winter with force. They outlasted it with patience, mass, and memory. Stone remembers the fire long after the flames are gone. Part 4. The Amish Protocol: When lifestyle becomes insulation. Having the technology is only half the story. Knowing how to live with it is what makes it powerful. The Amish don't survive winter because of a stove alone. They survive because of the system around it, the habits, routines, and decisions that turn heat into something that lasts. You could call it hardware and software. Most modern homes have the machines. The Amish perfected the operating system. Modern life is built around whole house heating. We expect every room, used or not, to be the same temperature. The guest bedroom, the hallway, the bathroom no one enters at night. All heated equally, all the time. To an Amish family, this is pure waste. Heat is valuable, you don't scatter it. Instead, they practice what could be called zone heating or behavioral ecology. As winter deepens, life naturally pulls inward. Family activity concentrates into one or two rooms: the kitchen, the main sitting room. Why heat 5 spaces when everyone can share one? That single choice changes everything. Fuel use drops dramatically. But something else happens too. A heat source modern systems ignore comes back into play: people. A resting human body produces roughly 100 watts of heat. 6 people sitting together, reading, sewing, talking, generate the equivalent of a small electric heater, running non-stop, for free. The Amish don't fight physics, they quietly use it. Architecture supports this mindset. Walk into a traditional Amish home or an older cabin in Indiana or Pennsylvania, and the difference is immediate. No open concept sprawl, No massive rooms bleeding heat into empty space. There are doors. There are thresholds. Often, heavy curtains hang in doorways, creating flexible barriers that stop warm air from wandering away. Airflow is controlled. Heat stays where it matters. And then there is the sun. Long before solar panels, the Amish understood passive solar design. Their homes are oriented so the long side faces south. In winter, when the sun sits low in the sky, those south-facing windows become collectors, pulling free energy deep into the living space. During the day, the house fills with light and warmth. At night, the ritual reverses. Thick quilts, real insulation, not decorative blinds, are drawn over the windows, sealing the heat inside. Open to harvest the sun, close to protect the warmth. Day after day, year after year. Nothing about this is complicated. Nothing requires electricity or modern technology. But together, these choices turn a house into a controlled microclimate, a place where heat is guided, shared, and preserved. The Amish didn't invent more energy. They learned not to waste it. And in winter, that discipline becomes insulation just as powerful as stone. Part 5. The survival skills we forgot. Now let's get practical, because winter doesn't just test houses, it tests nights. What happens when the fire burns low? What happens when you go to sleep? Modern sleep science tells us something surprising. We sleep better in cooler air. And long before laboratories confirmed it, the Amish already knew. They never tried to keep bedrooms at 70 degrees. They allowed the house to breathe, to cool naturally as night settled in. But they did not freeze, because they understood a rule modern living forgot. You heat the person, not the space. This brings us to a tool so simple it sounds almost laughable today, the bed warmer. Long before electric blankets and disposable technology, Amish families and their ancestors relied on thermal mass in bed. A brick, a smooth river stone, heated gently on the wood stove in the evening, wrapped in thick cloth, and slid to the foot of the bed just before sleep. It sounds primitive, until you remember physics never expires. That stone releases warmth slowly for 6 to 8 hours, creating a small, sealed microclimate beneath the blankets. Your body stays warm while the surrounding air remains cool and fresh. No wires, no electricity, no failure point. Just stored heat doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And then there is clothing, the layer most people get wrong. Modern culture is obsessed with cotton. The Amish follow an older rule. Cotton kills. When cotton gets damp, it loses insulation and pulls heat from the body. Wool does the opposite. Wool insulates even when wet. It breathes. It regulates temperature naturally. Layered wool, against the skin, around the torso, over the shoulders, lets the body stay warm without overheating. It turns cold air into something manageable. That's why a 60-degree house feels comfortable when you're dressed correctly, but unbearable when you're not. The Amish don't adjust the thermostat to match their clothing. They adjust their clothing to match reality. And that single mindset shift saves enormous energy. Heat the body. Store warmth where it matters. Let the house cool without fear. These aren't tricks, they're survival skills, quiet, reliable, and immediately usable. Skills that turn winter nights from something to endure into something you simply live through. And once you understand them, you realize something unsettling. We didn't lose these skills because they stopped working. We lost them because we stopped needing to think. Until the night the fire goes out. Part 6. The economics of independence. And this brings us to the question everyone eventually asks. The cost. We are living in an age of unstable energy. Fuel prices spike without warning. Electricity rates climb year after year. And the grid, once assumed to be permanent, is showing cracks under storms, shortages, and strain. Modern heating isn't just about comfort anymore, it's about exposure. So let's talk honestly about return on investment. A masonry heater is not cheap. It isn't an appliance you slide into a basement. It's a construction project. Stone, labor, planning. $15,000, $20,000, sometimes more. And compared to a $5,000 forced air furnace, that price alone scares people away. But price is not cost. Time is. A modern furnace lasts maybe 15 years, 20 if you're lucky. It depends on motors, sensors, circuit boards, filters, and electricity. When one part fails, the whole system stops. And when the grid goes down, it stops instantly. A masonry heater is different. It has no moving parts, no fans, no electronics, nothing to burn out or short-circuit. In Europe, there are masonry heaters still operating after 2, 3, even 4 centuries. They don't age like machines, they age like buildings. Then there's fuel. Because masonry heaters burn extremely hot, often exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, they trigger secondary combustion. The smoke itself burns. What would be wasted exhaust in a metal stove becomes usable energy. The result is dramatic. Homes that need 6 to 8 cords of wood per winter with a conventional stove often need only 1 or 2 cords with a masonry heater. If you buy wood, that's thousands of dollars saved over a decade. If you cut it yourself, that's hundreds of hours of labor you never have to spend. Run the numbers honestly, and something unexpected happens. Within 5 to 7 years, the heater pays for itself. After that, the cost of heat drops close to zero. No monthly bills, no rate hikes, no geopolitical surprises turning your thermostat into a liability. This isn't just efficiency, it's independence. A masonry heater doesn't just warm your home, it insulates you from markets, outages, and uncertainty. It turns heat into something permanent, predictable, and owned. And once you experience that, the economics of modern heating begin to look less like convenience and more like dependency. Part 7. The lesson for the modern world. So why did we forget all of this? Why did we replace the quiet, sculptural stone hearts of our homes with noisy metal boxes hidden in basements and closets? The answer is simple and uncomfortable: convenience. We traded resilience for the flip of a switch. We gave up stored warmth for instant heat. We replaced the ritual of fire with the invisibility of a thermostat. Heat became something summoned on demand, not something understood, managed, or respected. As long as the system worked, it felt like progress. But now, as we watch storm after storm collapse power grids, as fuel prices surge and infrastructure shows its age, the weakness of that trade becomes obvious. Modern heating is fast, but fragile, efficient but dependent, comfortable but conditional. And suddenly, the old ways don't look primitive anymore. They look prepared. The lesson here is not that we all need to retreat into log cabins or abandon modern life, though there is wisdom in simplicity. The real lesson is resilience. What the Amish preserved and what ancient builders understood is something deeper. Thermodynamic sovereignty. The idea that a home should not just consume energy, but hold it. That a house is not merely a machine for living, but a shelter designed to work with nature instead of fighting it. That mass matters. That permanence matters. Stone and brick don't panic when the grid fails. They don't rely on algorithms or supply chains. They quietly do what they have always done: store warmth and release it slowly, predictably, and safely. In a world built increasingly on plastic, fiberglass, and short-term solutions, the Amish remind us of a forgotten truth. Real security is heavy, real warmth is stored, and real progress is not always about moving faster, but about remembering what still works when everything else stops. Conclusion: the warmth that endures. There is a certain kind of warmth that only stone can give. People who have felt it struggle to describe it. They say it feels like sunlight resting on a rock. Not sharp, not aggressive, but deep, soaking slowly into your bones. It doesn't rush, it doesn't vanish. It feels stable. And in a world that feels increasingly unstable, that kind of warmth means something more. The Amish winter heating system was never just about staying warm. It was about staying free. Free from fragile grids, free from fuel panic, free from systems that fail the moment conditions turn hostile. It survived modern technology because it never tried to cheat physics. It worked with it. By storing heat instead of chasing it, by building mass instead of relying on speed, it turned winter from an emergency into a season of quiet endurance, a time to slow down, to gather, to rest. So the next time the wind howls outside your walls and the lights flicker for just a second longer than they should, ask yourself one simple question. Is your home a battery, holding warmth, safety, and resilience? Or is it just a box, waiting for the grid to fail? Maybe the future isn't about inventing something new. Maybe it's about remembering what already worked. If you enjoyed this journey into forgotten history and survival engineering, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Historia Prime. There is still so much lost knowledge waiting to be uncovered. And tell me in the comments, if the grid went down tonight, how would you stay warm? Until next time, stay curious and stay warm.